Listen, when it comes to generating content, you can basically outsource the whole process. You can outsource the writing, you can outsource the packaging and design, you can even outsource production, but you cannot outsource your point of view. So if you haven't taken the time to decide and understand what you stand for, what you believe in, who you really are, and most importantly, codifying it, then your content is always going to be generic no matter how good your execution is. But luckily for you, that's exactly what we're going to talk about in today's episode. Welcome to the Storytelling Lab, where filmmaking, brand, and business all collide. My name is Bennett, a filmmaker and an author, and for over 2 decades, I've studied how stories actually work on the screen, inside organizations, and most importantly, out in the real world. So each episode, I host one of the world's greatest storytellers to help break down the art and science of storytelling as a system, not just a skill. That means how stories create connection, how they move people emotionally, and ultimately, how they drive action. So if you want to learn to tell stories that do more than just sound good, but they actually achieve something, then this, dear storyteller, is the show for you. What's up, storytellers? Welcome back to the Storytelling Lab podcast. Today, my guest is Kristen Sweeney. Kristen is the founder of Every Little Word, which is a content and communications agency that works with brands and organizations to understand exactly what they want to say, and then they say it for them. What I love most about Kristen and her work is she tends to work with B2B companies, especially those that operate in like sciences and higher education and really complex topics that need clarity the most. I see this all the time in complex industries like the medical field, which I happen to work in a lot, science, especially AI right now, anything that's harder for the layperson to understand, and they require someone to help them understand how to communicate it to people, because unless you're on the inside and understand all the jargon, it goes right over your head. This is why AI companies right now are hiring so many heads of storytelling and narrative leads and chief storytelling officers to help make their complex products understandable to their audience, to their customers, to their clients. Because I tell you, if I can't understand something, I certainly am not going to understand if I need it or not, and I'm certainly not going to be motivated to purchase it. So in this conversation, we get really deep into what Kristen calls the invisible work behind content creation. And that is the operations, the alignment, the messaging frameworks, the point of view, all of this pre-work that must be done first so that all of your content, no matter what medium, no matter what format, feels like your content is cohesive. It is aligned under the central brand narrative that you or your company stands for. We talk about how to find and identify that thing in your head, like what you stand for, how you really feel, your perspective, your point of view. And again, codifying it into something that is repeatable and scalable, making a system out of what exists only up here in your mind. That is one of the hardest things to do, and it's also one of the most overlooked and neglected things. So many brands that I know and have worked with before in the past try to add content onto things later. They go make their product, or they build their business and their infrastructure for the service that they offer, and then they go try to figure out how to talk about it. This is something you have to be doing on day one. Actually, I take that back. You need to be doing this on day 0. As soon as you have the idea for what you're trying to create, the business you're trying to grow, you need to start understanding what is important and impactful about it, who needs it, who needs the transformation that it offers, and understand what is the solution I'm really providing, and then weave that into how you talk about it from day 0, from as soon as you have the thought. So Kristen is an expert in this, in understanding how to be clear about that point of view in a way that you can scale into a system for your business. So here's my conversation with Kristen Sweeney, and I hope that you love it. Kristen, welcome to the Storytelling Lab.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
I'm glad to have you here. We're coming up on the holidays. This will come out after the holidays, but folks might be able to see my Christmas tree in the background and be able to tell. I am going to visit my mother next week, and so I'm going to start this episode off with a question that I get from her often every year, and I'm going to pass it on to you. And I find this an interesting question for those of us who kind of work in this space. And the question is that she asked me, what is it that you do?
Oh my God, the hardest question ever.
So your laughter tells me that you've probably gotten this a time or two before, but I am always interested in how people kind of like self-define that when they do this communication style work.
Yeah. So it's really interesting you say that because very recently I attended a conference. I went through a program run by Goldman Sachs called 10,000 Small Businesses. And it's a program where there's a lot of education, there's support. It's a great program. And they had for alumni, they had a 2-day conference in DC. We went and talked to lawmakers. We heard from a lot of great speakers. Anyway, long story short is it was people very much business owners, but outside of the marketing and communications bubble, which is my kind of world and my people. And when I told people that I ran a content and communications agency, I got a lot of blank looks. I think that is the version of what I do for marketing and comms leaders in that conversation. But one of the things I've realized is I think the answer to that question really does, just like we would say with any other kind of communication, like need to be segmented based on your audience and the person in front of you. So a really basic version is we help you figure out what you want to say, and then we help you say it. Our focus is written communication primarily. We work with organizations mostly engaged in some aspect of like B2B engagement. And we usually are developing for them expert-led content, meaning we're taking the expertise in the heads of all the people who work in that organization, and we're finding ways to externalize that through certain communication strategies, specific content assets, and things like that.
Can you say that line again for me, that we help you figure out what you want to say?
Figure out what you want to say, and then we say it. Help you say it. Yeah.
I like that. What would you say the most important part of your work is for the people that you serve? Like, what's the big domino that kind of knocks down the rest?
Really interesting. I think there's two. I think it's been interesting for us because I would just get right into this. I love it. So I think when you are a business owner, which I am, and you learn a lot about positioning and value proposition and differentiation and all of these concepts, kind of one of the big like no-go zones you hear is like, don't differentiate yourself on quality. That's very subjective to say I'm better than somebody else, who cares, etc. That's something I have in mind. And that being said, a lot of the feedback we get from our clients is the end result of what we create through our process, the thing we wrote, right, is better than we could write ourselves. It's better than I work with my big agency. It's better than freelancers I've used before. It's better. That makes it easier for us. We have fewer revisions. We don't have to go back and forth with subject matter experts. It saves us a lot of time. We're really proud of the end product. That's kind of the feedback we get. So that is a piece that I think is really important. And then the other piece that I value a lot, and I think it's still sometimes can be a little bit invisible to our clients, is what I call like the invisible work, the content operations piece. Like, we get things done. And I can't tell you how many times, we've been the second or third or fourth partner in an engagement, and it's been like, I don't know, we were just kind of hanging out with them, and it felt like we weren't actually achieving anything. And the thing about content communications, this work, is that the strategy is extremely important. You have to get aligned. Internal documentation like messaging is critical. And at the end of the day, you can't even begin to talk about results or impact until you actually put something out into the world. And so knowing how to kind of manage the processes from start to finish, knowing how to manage subject matter experts, executives who are contributing, knowing how to really not only plan to work against timelines and deadlines, but also I feel like there's just a certain amount of like grit required to get things over the finish line.
Yes.
And that is actually one of the things I think we bring as well.
I think that's a good point and a good way to bat that ball back about the don't differentiate yourself with quality. Sometimes it's fine. I think that's different for different brands, but I think that's totally fine to say, like, no, we're really freaking good at what we do, and you're busy doing what you do, so you're probably not as good at what we do.
Right.
And it's like, we're the professionals at this. We're the experts at this. There's nothing wrong with leading with that. One of the things I'm kind of fascinated with when looking at your work is helping industries or businesses, spaces that are generally convoluted, confusing, opaque, maybe. So I'll just ask you, what are the industries where communication, like clarity and communication, are the biggest struggles typically?
Yeah. So I think that it kind of depends on how you're considering it, but I have a
Fair.
couple different answers for you.
Yeah.
So I think pharma is one that comes to mind.
sure.
From highly regulated. It's got to be right. It's got to be
Yes.
accurate. No matter how much personality you're trying to bring or how much differentiation, that is all secondary to accuracy.
Most of those actually come from that perspective, right? Like it's the sorry to jump in, but it's
No,
I'm
please.
just now seeing that clearly because I talk about this a lot, but it's usually legal, pharmaceutical, like science, where accuracy
Yep.
is the utmost importance. So
Yes.
please continue that thread, but this is really exciting to me.
Yeah. So I think that that's where, you've got to know how to, you've got all these tools, right? And like brand voice, messaging, differentiation, like all of these things are things that you want to be weaving into your narratives, your content, your communications. But at the same time, you kind of have to know in how much measure of each. And that's going to depend on the industry, and like really specifically laid out regulations, the kind of, I would say, the general vibe of the company and what like their kind of tolerance for risk or interest in being different is. And then of course the individuals you're working with as well. So one of the interesting things we find is in an industry like pharma, life sciences, where again, you're dealing with a lot of regulation, a lot of really technical content, it can be, I think, challenging to differentiate on the corporate messaging side. Everyone in that industry wants to help patients, and they have, certain areas, disease areas of focus, certain modalities, certain things they are doing differently. Absolutely. But by the time it's kind of been through that whole machine, it often comes out as like helping patients. And of course, like that's a shared goal and the right one. But where we see the opportunity to kind of like bring in a little more differentiation than maybe they're comfortable with at an organizational or corporate level is in those individual voices. So like working with an individual thought leader who's able to share their perspective. They are a representative of their company, but they are not the full brand voice. And so that allows a little more flexibility and leeway to share something that's like unique and a little more different, I guess, than kind of the like standard company line. So that's one space. I'm trying to make sure I recall the original question because I did have a second answer.
What are the typical industries or spaces where, clarity can be an issue, or that you really have to work with them to make things understandable with their communication because they're top level or because we're focused on compliance, et cetera, et cetera. And what I often find is sometimes people or organizations complicate things in the interest of being clearer or trying to give more information to make it clearer, and it has the opposite effect, right? Like, you've given me so many details now, I'm lost. I see that all the time. I work a lot in the medical space as well with documentaries and such, and you talk to a doctor, it's very similar, right? It's like you're talking in jargon, or maybe that you're giving just a little bit more information for context, but now I'm lost in the sauce because you went a little too like esoteric for me to grasp. And so, yeah, the original question was, what are the industries that you see as a pattern where people really struggle with communication?
Yeah. So, okay. Perfect. So I think on the other side of that, I would probably bucket it as actually like B2B professional services. I think there can be some challenges in there. And part of that is, in some ways, maybe it's not quite the opposite problem, but you're operating a lot less on hard science, right? You're not working with this set of facts that we have to transmit extremely accurately. And so a lot of times those folks are, I don't want to say what they do is not fully baked, but let's say like articulating it in a clear story is not fully baked. They are experts at the work that they do, but how to take the hundreds of decisions they make every day and like streamline that into a clear narrative can be challenging. Can be confusing. And I think a lot of those organizations don't always have, they don't necessarily have like a really clear, here's our start to finish process. Here is our framework that we use. Here are the 10 steps we go through. They are, and this is their secret sauce, more reliant on the kind of genius of the people who work in the organization. And there's a lot that those folks intuit. There's a lot that they kind of make decisions. Maybe they can't even quite explain because it's based on years of experience and honed expertise. But they struggle to step back and say, what are the 6 quick thoughts that ran through my head before I said that piece of advice or gave that recommendation?
What a great answer for that, because I was coming from the other side, but this is so true. And like, these are my people, our people, I think. So I know a lot of them, and it's very true. And it's funny because coincidentally, I think just today or maybe yesterday, I read a LinkedIn post that was talking about scaling as a solopreneur and how it's basically impossible if you're struggling with that syndrome of like every client that you take on is, it's full of your intuition and this magic that only you have, but you can't like make a process out of a repeatable process. Like, doesn't mean you can't have a successful business. It's just really hard to scale that if every time you're starting from square one and you don't have a step laid out. Or oftentimes, like you basically alluded to, you might have that step, but it's kind of buried in the back of your head, or that process, and you haven't laid it out clearly for other people to understand. And so you see these vagaries in their taglines. And yeah, that's equally challenging for people to understanding. What a great point.
Yeah, it makes me think about, so I work with a small team, and there was a point where we had struggled a little bit in the role of, it's now an account manager role. It was previously called client services. And one of the things that I had struggled with was that I was giving up, when we had someone in that role, a lot of the direct communication with clients, like over email and such. I would still meet with them, but I wasn't their day-to-day point of contact. And so when we brought in our current account manager, who's wonderful and has been truly transformative for our organization, but I wanted to get ahead of that and be really prepared. And so I sat down to create a document called Client Communication Guidelines. And it's like a 3-page or more in-depth thing about, like, I really let it loose, right? I was like, when they say this, you want to do this. When, you want to be assumptive with your approvals. Highlight things in yellow because that's their assigned color so that they know exactly what the most important thing is in this email. Ask 1 question per email. Like, I had so many thoughts and opinions about how I wanted things to go. And that was like one successful example of where, after a few misfires, I was able to actually codify that and say, here's everything I know and think about this. And I never realized I had that many opinions about it and about how it should be done.
It's so important. And you took the word right out of my mouth with codify it. Like, so many people especially with small teams, overlook that and neglect that of having that consistency. And you might think it's pedantic or micromanagey. It's not. And that's so helpful. I would think one of the things, this is a little bit of a tangent, but related, is like naming conventions for me are a big thing when you're dealing with a team or organization. And so I'm a filmmaker, and so lots of video files and audio files. Team, we got to be on the same page about what we call this. I don't know, because the classic like joke is there's ABC video final, and then there's ABC video
Oh, yeah.
final. It's just like we need initials, we need dates, we need consistency in how we do
Yeah.
this, or just giving acronyms to commonly used terms or products that we have, so that we're all clearly on, one person's not calling it something else. That's so important, that consistent language.
Yeah.
So I think in understanding how we talk to clients, what we say when this is said or done is extremely important. But I also think that's probably something that's like the easiest thing to just let slide.
Yeah.
And you don't even realize how insidious it can be.
And I think you don't realize that you have a really particular point of view. I think we assume that that's just like good practice, but actually I have a really specific point of view about all my communication with clients, and it's to reduce friction. It like aligns with our core values, and like that's not everyone's approach, and that's totally okay, but it is mine. And I think this actually ties into a lot of the work that we do, where we're taking folks who are kind of like, I don't have anything specific to say, and digging deeper and being like, actually, you have a really specific point of view that informs all of your actions. And if we can kind of come back to that, that's where the root of a lot of really interesting content comes from.
Speaking my language, I feel like people will probably laugh at me because I just got really excited when you're saying that, but it's 100% true that it should be driven from or stemming from your vision, your values, like what you stand for. Those things inform and influence all of your decisions, even how you talk to people. It's such a great point. If your guiding principle, your North Star, whatever, is frictionless, then your conversations with your clients should be frictionless, right? Mm-hmm. Your website, the flow of your website should be frictionless. Like that's the thing. And I don't want to say none of us, because clearly you do and you help people do this, but few of us spend the time I think that it's important to spend on that part of the system. Let's talk. You've mentioned brand voice, and when you're talking about individuals, et cetera. And the first thing that you said when I asked what you did is like, we help people figure out what you want to say, and then we say it for them. So what's the work? What's the process that you do with someone? I know this is a big answer. I don't expect you to give me the whole 90-day process, but where do you start maybe when you're trying to help identify that person or that team, identify what they want to say and how they want to say it? Like, how do you dig in and find their story? Where do you start? That's a big task.
Yeah, 100%. So I would say, of course, it all starts with kind of the overarching strategy of what we're trying to accomplish. And that's really important when we talk about who we're talking to and what we're trying to get from them. A lot for years and years, what I described what we did as thought leadership. And there's a big component of what we do that is thought leadership. But it never felt like it was kind of the full umbrella to me. I think the word thought leadership has become just really big catch-all at this point, and I wanted to define it more clearly. So the reason I say that is, for me, thought leadership and the way we define it is it's working with a single individual at a time to elevate their individual voice. So if I'm working with a CEO of an organization and we're building their voice out, that's a thought leadership program. That's a thought leadership initiative. The other piece, the kind of umbrella piece of what we do, is we use internal insight inside organizations. We talk to executives, subject matter experts, all sorts of folks to create company content, right? This expert-led content kind of encompasses both, but this is your blogs, your white papers, your things like that. The white paper doesn't have to have the CEO's name on it. It may or may not include some of their insights. Sometimes it's more of a blend of, we talk to several people inside an organization, and the collective knowledge and insights become a content asset. So in both cases, we are talking to people to get their information. So just with that framing, it's usually a conversation for us, understanding how, again, kind of thinking about that. Another one of our core values is be resourceful. So how can we make the best possible use of the time we're going to get with this person once they're in front of us? So as much as we can, usually the marketing or comms teams we're working with, figuring out what are we trying to talk about? What's the main focus here? How can we prepare ourselves with background information so that the questions we ask aren't the 101 level questions? They're the questions worthy of this expert in front of us that only they can really answer, or that require their specific insight. We'll tailor a set of interview questions that are a guide, a starting point for the conversation. And then we really get on the call. We prefer, we can work async, but really we want to work, be live and dialoguing with that person. And we start kind of working through the questions. So we follow them where they lead. It is definitely not a rote, one at a time kind of conversation. I've certainly had interviews where we get on and the expert basically is like, I'm throwing out the premise, and we're like, okay, what have you got here? It's our job while we're doing that to make them feel comfortable, kind of glean or intuit where we can dig in a little deeper, or where there might be like a nugget of something interesting that could expand into, sometimes that's the whole piece. One sentence they said that we come back to, and it's like, that's the thesis statement of what we're trying to create. And also keep in mind that we're not just there to have an interesting conversation. We are there to have an interesting conversation that can result in some kind of structured narrative at the end. So also making sure while we're managing the clock, that we're keeping them on track and getting what we need in terms of raw information in order to go away, create the content independently. Our goal is to not have to go back to that person and say, oh, actually, we need these 3 other things answered for you. Or, oh, actually, what about this? What about that? We want to try and get as much as we can done during that interview so that they can be on to the next thing on their busy calendar.
Is there a pattern in the types of clients you tend to work with? I'm sure it's across the board. Are they all completely different, or do you find yourself in a couple of different industries primarily?
We work across primarily life sciences. We've got a practice in higher education, and then a lot of B2B professional services, kind of like a wide range of consulting and kind of other financial, legal, things like that.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
I've got a question. I'm going to steal a couple of minutes of your time selfishly, but I think that the listeners will benefit from it too, because it definitely still applies. I want to talk about kind of the copycat problem, right? Of seeing others and what they're saying and emulating that maybe a little too closely. So my direct question is, do you think it's valuable or not to be aware of what others in your space and how they're showing up and presenting themselves, how they're speaking the language that they're using, or to like just, put your blinders on and be tunnel vision and focus on you and why you're here and what you stand for, or maybe even pulling inspiration from outside of your industry in the interest of like, avoiding that copycat problem that can be easy sometimes, I think, where we're all in the same industry saying the same things.
Yeah. This is like it feels like a really personal question for me,
Is it?
honestly.
No.
Yeah. So my preference as a human being, and I'm not saying this is better, is I'm definitely more of a tunnel vision type person.
Yeah.
I can definitely get dismayed when a great idea I thought I came up with, someone else posted about it on LinkedIn.
Good word.
And so that's my personal preference. That being said, I think that I am, as I've matured as a business owner, I think I'm a lot more plugged in, and I do think a blend probably makes sense. It's going to depend a little bit on the space. So, for example, again, pharma, like proof of concept is everything, right? They want to know that somebody else is saying something similar, or engaging in a similar way, showing up on a similar channel. Nobody wants to be, someone just said to me recently, nobody wants to be first and nobody wants to be last. Like in the happy middle there.
The first one through the wall gets the bloodiest.
Yeah. Yeah. So I would say that in general, I think that the process by which we work with folks can somewhat, whatever path they sort of choose on their own, can can circumvent that a little bit, because if they say something that just feels surfacey, it usually shows up like this. Oh, I want to do a piece about trends. I think we should do it like, yeah, I see other people doing things about trends. Great. What are the trends that you see? And if they haven't really thought about that for themselves, obviously it's possible to cast about and like pull something together on trends, but I'm going to pressure test that against like, do you have something specific, even if it's a similar trend to what other people are seeing? Sure, that's why it's a trend, but like, what from your own experience are you going to be able to add to this conversation? And if it's like a big zero, we're going to evaluate that. So I would say just kind of by digging in, sometimes you can maybe rule out a little bit of well, can't you just do what they did and rewrite it? Like, that's not the conversation we want to be having with our clients.
That's such a good pressure test, as you said. Like, well, what are the trends you're noticing? I
mean, I'm amazed how many times we get like, yeah, so, we want to write about, keyword. It's like, great. What about it? Like,
then blank stares.
What's the point? Like, what are we saying about that thing? We can put that keyword in a piece of content as many times as you want, but we have to have, we've really moved past the informational what is kind of content.
So big time.
Really want to be thinking about what is the point of view? What about that particular topic are we actually?
Point of view is everything nowadays and moving forward. It's it's drastically changed. I want to shift a little bit and ask some more personal questions. I am very interested for this next one. I know you have a musical theater background.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm glad you piped up. I'm just interested in, and you may not have the direct answer, so we can just, talk in general about this, but I always love to investigate the paths of people's lives and how it led to, to one thing from their passions, their skills, their experiences, where they come from, who they come from. How do you think, if at all, that passion of yours has influenced the work that you do today?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I definitely see in my own trajectory becoming more practical over time. Starting off in musical theater, and then that's kind of I would say like the more exciting career, but sort of in between really focusing on musical theater and then running an agency, I also had a number of years where my main focus and sort of my main identity was being a yoga teacher as well. And so I pursued theater because it was my passion, and I was someone who didn't care about money. That's very lucky of me to be able to embrace that in my early 20s. And then I realized that musical theater was a lot of really hard, sometimes soul-crushing auditioning and brief pockets of excitement when you got to actually go do a show or perform. And so I was working like every kind of day job you could imagine, living in New York. And I realized like I need some kind of day job. Still not one that made a lot of money, by the way, but I need to do something fulfilling every day. And so teaching yoga became that thing for me. And that was kind of my day job. And over time, my participation in theater decreased. My participation in yoga increased. And then I had my first daughter, and I kind of woke up and was like, okay, let's reevaluate. And I realized that I was in Boston by that time, and I didn't want to drive all over the greater Boston area for $50 a class. And that if I had time on a Sunday to do yoga, I wanted to take the class, not teach it, because those are the kind of trade-offs you have to make when you have an infant. And I had been freelance writing in the meantime. And like really had a more economic decision of like, this is going to fit better with my life. I can control the schedule more. I can align with my husband's schedule. So I went from being someone who worked all nights and weekends because that was the kind of flexibility I wanted, to someone who was like, no, I actually want to work when my husband's working, and so we can be together as a family. So that's like there's a theme in terms of like the trajectory there. I would say when I think about theater, one of the interesting things that comes up for me is actually the kind of equalizing nature. When I have worked on stage with, big Broadway performers and things like that, the status you may have, off stage, really can't translate on stage because your roles might be completely reversed, right? You might be the high status person in your role, and they might be the low status person, something like that. A production of Les Mis comes to mind, where like the two biggest leads were definitely low status characters when it comes to the roles they were playing. And you can't let that intimidate you. You have to really treat them as peers. It also brought together like people from all different backgrounds, all different ages, levels of experience, things like that.
Yes.
I think that somehow instilled in me some kind of confidence of going in and talking to executives, like meeting a CEO, dealing with a really technical subject matter expert of like, we're here for a shared goal. We come from different places. We have different skills, but I'm not afraid of you, like for the most part,
Yes.
And I think that can make a big difference in terms of the quality of the conversation that you could have with someone when you approach
100%.
them with, I may not know everything you know. That's literally why we're here. But I do know that I have the skills I can bring to facilitate a really strong conversation that ultimately is going to help us execute on this content strategy.
Great answer. Great answer. It's interesting. I have a similar journey with, I taught fitness for a while, not yoga, at a yoga studio, but it was more like group exercise, body weight, calisthenics and such. And I find that people like us, people, entrepreneurs, right, are multi-passionate. Often
yeah.
you have multiple things. I mean, I have an art background as well. I mean, I've been a filmmaker for 20 years, started off acting. I did theater, not as seriously as you did, but like in school and in church choir and things like that. I wish I'd have done it more. And also had the same passion and got the same fulfillment from teaching people fitness. Love that. And I get the same kind of feeling when I help people in the work that I do now. So, pulling that thread, what's the most fulfilling part of your work now?
First, I want to say I love the word multi-passionate, and the name of my corporation that owns Every Little Word, Every Little Word's just like a DBA, is This Renaissance Woman, because of like doing all of the things.
See, I love it. Yes,
So I really relate to that. The most fulfilling part of what I do now, I would say, so our company mission is to share great ideas with the world. So at the end of the day, that feedback and that fulfillment usually comes from something that has gotten all the way through to completion, crossed the finish line, been published, and the contributor, a contributor or the leader who kind of helped us, marketing and comms team who helped us shepherd it through, comes back and says like, this really nailed it. Like this captured my voice. This really articulated everything we want to say. This explained who we are so clearly. And they feel that is usually mirrored by the reception, right? And how it's received and other feedback they're getting. But I would say even before they get the plaudits for it, they get the likes and the clicks, they already know, like there's something that resonates with them. They know. And even before that external validation comes, they have this like sense of, I shared something of myself or something of our company, like in the best way possible. And like facilitating that and being a part of that is pretty cool.
It's almost like wait for it, performance. You get the same kind of feeling, right? It's very true though. Like when you're dialed in, yes, the reaction is like a plus and the cherry on top, so to speak. But you do already have that feeling inside, like, no, we nailed it, we did good, and so therefore you don't necessarily need that reaction. It's just like a little validation.
Right.
But the internal validation is much more fulfilling, to use that word again.
Yeah.
I think so. That's a good point. What in your space would you like to do more of?
Like to do more of. I want to continue to expand the work that we do with clients more upstream. So in the last couple of years, we've started to take on more messaging. That was something I was kind of hesitant to touch early on. But I've realized the importance, like from the very practical perspective of like a single place where people can go and say, what are the key messages for our company? And we need to actually kind of stick to them. To the, like, that's super tactical, but also the strategic value of bubbling those things up, defining them, refining them, and documenting them. And it's because I've been on the other side of that, where a company isn't really, they want to be united, but they're not really sure what their stance is on a particular thing. And we're like creating a comment war in a Google Doc over a paragraph of text. And it's like, that's not the place we should be hashing out what is our point of view on this software tool, or like how to use software, or, something that's a much bigger kind of existential question for the organization. So that's definitely an expansion area that I think is so valuable and sometimes harder for people to latch onto, because it's not a thing that gets likes and clicks, right? It's internal, it's foundational, but it's super important.
Who or what is inspiring you at the moment?
I feel like I've talked about this a lot recently.
Not with me.
Not with you. Yeah. This is what I tell people, right? It doesn't matter if you feel like you sound like a broken record, but actually you're not at all. I am really into the TV show Pluribus. And I think even beyond the show, which I love, I also listen to the official podcast, and as well as like some analysis podcasts about it. That's kind of my like meta community. It's just like hearing other people talk about TV that I like, because my husband won't watch any of it with me. And I think it's like, it's taking me back a lot to my creative roots, and in the space that I'm in right now, I think is having a bit of a reckoning around what is the role of creativity. Some of the roles that were previously thought of as creative are kind of being rebranded as blank engineering, which is not to say engineers aren't creative, but there's a reason that shift is being made, and it's all gotten, sometimes it feels like it's more about spreadsheets than communication. And the unabashed, like, we thought this would be cool, or I was inspired by this, and not the ability to make those decisions and to feel confident in them without a pie chart or an analysis that sort of proves or justifies your case, just to say like, because I'm creative and that's reason enough. I'm really like loving that right now.
Absolutely. What I started Pluribus, but I haven't caught up since I think episode 3. What episode is it on now?
8.
Oh, I'm behind. But yes, it was very, very intriguing. I just I let the ball drop on that. So good to hear that you're enjoying it.
Yeah.
Love Vince Gilligan. That was, I got to catch up. That the first couple episodes, that was so freaky.
Yeah.
So well done. That's on Apple TV, folks, if you're listening. Last question before we go, and you did touch on this earlier, but I often find, I'm interested in this question with everybody. I often find that people are either in one of two camps when we're kind of like forecasting. Here we are at the end of the year, so we might be looking into 2026. They're either trying to, not dig their heels in a bad way, but like they're grounded and they're trying to firm up that foundation of what they're currently doing, or, and obviously I'm generalizing, or they are in the middle of some sort of pivot or a little rebrand or a new, challenge, task, project that they're looking forward to in the new year. What are you looking forward to most? Where are you trying to take your business looking forward into the next years?
Oh, yeah, that's a great question. In some ways, I feel like we're always in the middle of a pivot.
Preach.
Uh, Not because we're inconsistent, but I do think we're always evolving. And I will
yeah.
say, again, I was kind of talking about like maturity as a business owner, being able to kind of like pick my head up and look around at others and try to do that without feeling really inadequate. I think the recognition that some of that work is never done, I don't like that. I love, if you had asked me my favorite thing to do, I would say big projects that end. That's my favorite thing to do. Like an event that's over, a thing that you can put a ton of work into and then like check that box, close that door. Running a business, it turns out, is not really like that.
Not a successful business.
Yeah. So I would say we're always kind of playing with, and right now I think examining once again, so to be more specific, like specific sectors that we want to expand into and see if there's a need or an opportunity to really dig in even more deeply into like a subset of professional services, things like that. Also thinking about the commoditization of a lot of types of content and how we can really talk about ourselves in a way that more quickly helps people understand what we do, to bring it full circle, and the unique value that we bring. And so, I think even content marketing is a phrase I've moved away from because I feel like there's so many associations with it that no longer fit the bill around the kind of work that we do. So that's something I'm thinking about, is how do we best resonate with audiences based on really the core value that we're able to provide them. You kind of have to have that category that just vaguely orients people in the right direction, but then how can we explain that in a way and message that in a way that is going to help them go, oh, I get it. I get why you're different. I get why you're different than this competitor who actually looks nothing like you at all. But if we don't differentiate ourselves, we may get like lumped together.
It's a good point that you have to have that kind of macro picture to grab the attention, like the universal theme and then your unique take on it as well, right? They're not mutually exclusive. Like you need both, because often you think about like, what's my take on it? But you also have to at least catch their attention with the bigger picture issue that people will recognize. I think that's a good point to mention.
Yeah. I mean, there's all sorts of ways that people tell you to like write a value proposition or give an elevator pitch. But if you're just like, I help share great ideas with the world, like, that's really cool. I have the exact same question. What do you do? So I think you need some kind of container that's recognizable to people.
Absolutely. Well, Kristen, thank you for bringing it back full circle and landing the plane so perfectly. I appreciate you being here. This has been awesome.
This has been a wonderful conversation. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. My pleasure. I'll see you around social media land.
Sounds good.
My name is Rain Bennett. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed that episode, do us a favor and subscribe to the podcast. If you're already a subscriber and you're enjoying the show, give us a review and let us know the value that you've gotten from it. We love to hear from our listeners and learn about the benefits that they're getting from the show. That's what fuels us, and that's what fuels the show. And if you've already subscribed and you've already reviewed it and you think there's someone else that would benefit from listening to this show, please share it with them. The more we grow, the more we can help you grow, and that's what we're here to do. Join us next time on the Storytelling Lab.